what's up, everybody? It's Andrew, managing partner here at TopSDRs. Today, we're launching the first episode of our podcast. Chris, who's right next to me, Chris and I are going to be talking about our own stories, how we started TopSDRs, the emotions that we felt when we worked at big corporations, and what it was like coming out of Harvard and Cornell, and the pressures that we felt. So I hope you enjoy it, and appreciate you listening.
It's good to be rolling. I love the podcast format because we can just unwind and we can just give the full, unadulterated story. So I think we should just dive in. Let's just rock and roll. I think we should start with introductions, go into like quick intros. And honestly, maybe not quick intros. Maybe we can do long intros. Because we have the opportunity to do so.
Okay.
Right? That's what long form's all about. So why not take the opportunity to go into more detail on our backgrounds and what led us here and why we're doing what we're doing today. So I don't know. Do you want to kick us off, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. So start from who I am, you're saying, basically, right?
Yeah, like let's start birth year, preschool. No,
right.
Just maybe started high school into college. Who you are?
Yeah. So I'll talk. I'll just say, so my name's Andrew Wilkins. I am the managing partner here at TopSDRs. We are, for those who don't know, a recruiting firm based in New York City. Our whole focus is placing salespeople into the best startups in New York, and I think by extension, many of the best startups in the world. My background, very quickly, I graduated from Harvard in 2019. I was on the rowing team there. I, right out of school, went and worked at Barclays for 2.5 years. I did an internship there my junior year. I studied history in college just because I thought it was interesting academically. I didn't really have any aspirations to be a history professor or anything like that. And I saw everyone going down the finance path. I think at Harvard and a lot of the top schools, it's finance, consulting, maybe big tech, so I just kind of continued down the path that I saw everyone else doing, and ended up at Barclays. I had a great time there. Like I really look back on the experience overall, positively, but it was very clear to me while I was there that it was not the thing I wanted to be doing long term. I didn't look at the people in the proverbial corner office and think that's what I want to be doing forever. So ultimately made the decision to leave Barclays and join a Series A startup as an SDR. And that is where our story really starts in terms of TopSDRs and all of that. So I can talk a little bit more about that experience specifically, but maybe I'll hand it over to you quickly. And I know that'll be a lot of the content of today. So maybe I'll pass it over to you, and you can do a quick introduction on yourself as well.
Yeah. So Chris Wilkins, Andrew's brother. We're about a year apart, for those wondering. And
16 months to be exact.
Have another younger brother. Actually, there's 3 of us. I went to Cornell, wrote at Cornell, loved my time in Ithaca. I think, rowing was a massive part of my experience. The sort of like athletic experience is a huge piece of my like collegiate experience. I studied economics because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and it kept a lot of doors open. I think like many people, when you're kind of 18 to 22 years old, it's hard to make a decision about what the rest of your life is going to be. And so for me at that stage, I just wanted to keep as many doors open as possible so I could basically push that decision off and make it later when I had more information on what I wanted to do. So economics was a great way to kind of keep lots of doors open while still having kind of a respected, universally applicable degree. I came out of school and I worked at Visa. I interned at Visa my junior summer. Kind of didn't want to go the super traditional finance route, like the exposure to tech. Had my uncle worked at Visa, so like had some avenues into the business, and it was like a cool overlap that was like a relevant application of my degree, and roughly satisfied the things that I was looking for. I spent 5 years at Visa, did 3 different roles. I did a partnerships role, a consulting role, and a sales role throughout my time there. And, generally liked my experience. I had like a really, what I would describe as a very positive 5-year tenure at Visa, and met some really great people and learned a lot about a pretty unique industry and a business that operates an absolutely insane business model. And, feel lucky to have had my time there, but also by the end, came to the realization that I had more that I wanted to give and more that I wanted to contribute, and wanted to find more energy in the work that I was doing. And, luckily had a small business, a startup that I could come and contribute to in a very meaningful way, which is the business that we're now building. So made the transition out of Visa and into this, and here we are. That was almost a year ago now.
Yeah.
And it's just been insanely energizing to be building this business and being associated with some of the fastest growing businesses in the world, and having direct exposure to those businesses, and having some degree of impact on those businesses as well by directing absolutely stellar talent into these environments. So that's my quick version as well, but again, can go into more detail on any of this stuff, and will as we kind of progress through this. So what do you think we should dive into first? I think maybe one of the things I want to double click on is in college, how you were thinking about what you wanted to do, and why you ended up going the route that you went. I think that's one of the sort of major focal points that people almost don't even realize how important that decision is at the time, and how much of an impact it has on their life trajectory.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth spending time on what made you decide to pursue Barclays, pursue sales and trading or finance. How were you thinking about your career when you were a, say, junior in college?
Yeah. So I'd say I didn't really have, honestly, I was just thinking about what other people were doing, right? I think I think one of the traps that I see, I don't know, maybe trap's too harsh of a word, but one of the things that I, in retrospect, look back up and I'm like, wow, I was thinking about this incorrectly, was I was kind of gauging what it meant to have a successful career based on prestige, honestly. I think when you go to a good high school, you go to a good college, you kind of get put on this path of following things that have great brand names, and you get addicted to adding those resume lines that are flashy and that you tell people about at cocktail parties and they sound really good. And so I was, you ask how I was thinking about my career. I was thinking about resume lines, and everything that attracted me was something that was flashy that I could tell someone about, that would sound good and that would kind of boost the ego a little bit, because that was all I knew, right? That's what I think. The bulk of the paths coming out of these top schools are all, they're finance, consulting. Those are where people are going, and so. So that was, I think, initially my guiding light was I just need to get into one of these spots. And I wasn't even asking what they did. I wasn't what do they do? Why do I want to do it? It was just all right. And honestly, there's probably a little bit of this that is why I went to Harvard too, where I was just all right, I just know that this is a good brand name. If I get in there, I need to go. And I didn't really pause to ask, why, what the right fit for me was. And I think Harvard was an amazing experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But yeah, I think there was a lot of that kind of logo chasing. That was how I was thinking about it early on.
It's kind of the lowest acceptance rate. Yeah, it's almost like you're drawn to the lowest acceptance rate path. It's a combination of low acceptance rate and highest compensation is basically all I'm considering in my career, because that's a way I'll be validated. And it's also we've sort of built the muscle, especially as athletes, to endure pain for some delayed gratification, for some delayed result. And so it's a lot of finance is okay, I'm not going to like what I'm doing at all, but there's some reward down the road of high compensation and pedigree and prestige. And you basically don't have to worry about, you actually almost don't need to like your job, because you've built the muscle for enduring pain to achieve a reward, which is a super interesting thing. But then you settle into your career and you're oh, wait a second, this is 80 hours a week of my life for the next 35 years. maybe this is a little bit different than like being
Yeah.
able to sit through a 2 hour like difficult practice and
Yeah.
like be stronger at the end of that.
They're totally different. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Um, yeah, I mean, I have just a lot of thoughts on this in general, but I think that I don't. My other thing on this is I don't think that there's a lot. I'm not saying that like in college you should pass up on these things. By the way, I think that's like a really key point. Like, I think there's value to having a good professional experience and brand names on your resume. It definitely does give you some sort of a cushion. And also, like, you genuinely don't know what you want to do long term. And some people will love working at these big firms. There's no doubt. I think it's important though to have the mentality of trying things out though, right? And not like, hey, I need to go to this place and I'm going to be here forever. Like, I think that I wish I had known that careers are kind of like playing sports. Like when you're 5 years old and you play sport, you're not going into your soccer practice as a 4-year-old being like, all right, well, I guess I'm doing this for the next 20 years, right? You're just like, no, I'm figuring it out. I'm having fun. I'm liking it. I'm not liking it. I'm good at it. I'm not good at it, right? And you bounce around. You do track. You play soccer. You play hockey during the winter. You're playing basketball. You're swimming. You're whatever, right? And you're kind of finding, as you collect more data points and try more things, you're beginning to learn what you're naturally good at, what you really enjoy. And you can kind of find, hone in on that thing that you ultimately really might be your calling. And I think that's probably the same thing for careers. There's an awesome book on this by Robert Greene, who wrote 48 Laws of Power. It's called Mastery, and he talks about exactly this. And just kind of the idea of trying a lot of different things until you find the thing that you're really obsessed with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's like not how we're trained to think really in school. We're sort of trained to decide what we're going to do and then commit to it. And I don't know, maybe that's something that our parents' generation was more that was definitely a reality that we saw a lot of. I think if you look at many people in our parents' generation, the generation before us, like they spent 40 years at the same company and they like basically decided on how they're going to make a living when they were 20 years old and they just committed to that. And like, I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore that like you need to follow. Like, I mean, it's certainly not true anymore that you need to follow that path.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that's programmed into us. I also like one thing I really don't understand in college is like why it's not more of a focal point. Like the career decision is not more of a focal point. Like it seems to be that you're collecting credits, you're doing classes in like kind of niche like disciplines. I mean, maybe this is just like a liberal arts degree that I got, which was, I was taking French and I was taking science classes and I, was taking history classes and creative writing and like none of that time was actually devoted to me thinking about like, what do you genuinely want to do? What do these different career paths look like? What does it mean once you get in the door there? What does the trajectory look like once you get in the door?
Yeah.
Like, how does it evolve? It feels like something that should be more present on college campuses because that is like the starting point of everyone's career is like what you decide to do. That junior internship is like always incredibly important for predicting your trajectory out of school. So I don't know. It's like a funny thing that's not like the focal point of college. So anyways, yeah.
Yeah. I think kind of going into the story a little bit more and talking like, I mean, maybe we should just talk a little bit about our experience in these like big corporate jobs and what it was actually like working there. And then we can go into, the story around why we left and what that looked like.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to start.
Yeah, kick us off.
I think, first of all, I'll talk about some of the good. Like I came into the business with a ton of motivation. Like that junior summer, I came in really hungry because I needed to earn my full-time offer. So I, grinded for that summer, was incredibly passionate, learned a lot, and like genuinely contributed over the course of that summer. Came back with the same level of energy. I was incredibly excited to contribute to the team, be like a meaningful contributor, see the impact of my work. And, I obviously had like sort of a unique experience in that I started during COVID. So I was actually like working from my apartment for a lot of the first year that I was in corporate America. And and settled into that team and kind of came to the realization throughout the course of that year that the rewards for the work that I was putting in were not directly tied to my contributions. Like basically the structure of my compensation was predetermined, regardless of whether I was just meeting the bar or dramatically exceeding the bar. I was going to be compensated the same. I was going to be on the same promotion path because these things had been established, over the course of the past 40 years at a company like Visa. They build the structure of what it means to be an early career employee. And it's incredibly hard to break out of the structure that they've created for these early career employees. And so you realize that you are just a part of the machine, really. And I worked hard over the course of my 5 years to not just be a part of the machine. Like I did not want to just be a cog in the machine that is a Fortune 15 company. I wanted to be a real contributor. And it's hard to do when you're 22 years old to like have a meaningful impact on a $500 billion business. But that was my goal. And I came in and I built the Young Professionals organization within Visa in the New York office.
What was that?
It's basically like a employee resource group focused on young professionals. It brought together 100 of the New York office, like young employees, kind of 22 to 30. And we would have monthly kind of gatherings or events, happy hours, whatever. And just like brought together a little bit of like collaboration across this like group of people within Visa. And, there's no reward for that. Like it is, sure, you get like a shout out at the town hall, but your salary is not changing. Your promotion path isn't accelerated. You don't really see any material reward for that. And then in the work that I was doing, like, I think at a lot of these large organizations that are super successful, like there's a little bit of complacency, and Visa aligned their culture with that of big tech companies in San Francisco. They're headquartered in San Francisco. The culture that they, basically tracked and followed was, that of their peers in San Francisco and in big tech. And the reality of those cultures in the kind of 2020 to 2024 era was one of the employees kind of have a lot of the power. We're going to give them nice snacks and free drinks and summer Fridays, and you don't really need to work much past 5 p.m. And the responsibility is so diluted down the corporate ladder that the expectations aren't super high for any individual employee. And so I sort of felt myself settling into the expectations of the environment that I was in, which were not excessively high and were ones that could be kind of like achieved through a pretty approachable amount of work, let's say. Like it was not super demanding. And so, I might be kind of rambling on this, but like that was what my time at Visa was. I came in super motivated, incredibly hungry, and like excited to contribute. And over the course of the 5 years, I think there was a little bit of a motivation vacuum where I wasn't really adequately rewarded for the additional work that I was putting in. I was meeting the bar. I was exceeding the bar, but rewarded as if I was just meeting the bar. And like gradually got to the point where because I was only incentivized to meet the bar, I was only meeting the bar. And so I realized I needed something more demanding. I wanted to be part of something more fulfilling. I wanted to be more energized by the work that I was doing. And luckily I had an outlet to do that, which is TopSDRs and what we're building now. And so that's the kind of detailed overview of my time there.
Nice. I can share a little bit about mine too. I think that's, I don't need to go super deep, but I think like the core tenets of what you're saying, I don't know, Barclays is a little different, and like being in a bank's a little different because, you're sort of describing that some of your qualms with what with the culture that you were in is there wasn't the drive and ambition wasn't necessarily on par with what you personally felt. And I actually don't think that was the case at Barclays. I think I think any of these banks, as people will know, have cultures of very high performance, and there are you're working a lot. Like, I was in the office at 5:45 in the morning every day, and we'd leave at 7 p.m. or something to go. I need to go out to drinks with clients. Like, people are grinding. I think for me, it was more a thing where I saw people in their element. Like, I saw people who were really good at this role and they really liked it. And in seeing that, I realized I wasn't one of them. I was like, I don't know that I don't feel the fire that this person feels, right? And that is, and I think that was a really big thing for me, is like, I got my bonus. I remember I got my bonus, my first full year bonus, and I'm 23 or something, and I got a $105,000 bonus, mind you, like on top of my salary. And that felt good for a moment. And then it kind of evaporated and went away. And I was like, oh man, I got 364 more days until the next one, right? And I think that to me was it was very eye-opening, where it was like, well, if the reward here is just money, I don't know that that's enough for me. Like, and listen, I recognize it's a really privileged thing to say, right? Like, I realize that there are, in a lot of cases, that's more than, you could ask for, right? But I think I realized, hey, you know what? I am really young. I've been blessed to be in a position where I don't have a lot of things I'm responsible for outside of myself right now. And I have a strong foundation. Like, I should go test myself a little bit more, and I think I came to the realization that I used to think you go to a Harvard, you go to a Cornell, because it sets you up for life and it guarantees you a path that is safe and reliable and comfortable. And I think what I've realized since is that the reality is you go to one of those schools because it creates some type of safety net that will allow you to take big risks that have asymmetric upside. And that is kind of the mental framing I had to, or the change I had to make in my mentality was I used to think it's all about just guaranteeing income for a long time. What I think I've realized since is that it's about finding something that you can pour yourself into, because that's where you're going to be really successful. I mean, again, I go back to this book, Mastery by Robert Greene, and every single person he talks about, from, Marie Curie to, Einstein, is obsessed with the things that they're doing, right? And it's almost like they don't care about the end product. I mean, they do, but they're not doing it for the end product. They're doing it because they're obsessed with the process. And I think that was what I learned in that environment, was you need to find the thing where you're obsessed with the process. And I saw people around me who were, and they are crushing it. They're making 8 figures now, which is amazing. So, yeah, I mean, I could talk more about it, but I think that was probably the biggest takeaway from that experience for me.
Yeah, it's so true. Like, in order to sustain the level of work that's required to be like a top 1%er at anything, you have to actually like what you're doing. Like, you can't constantly show up every day and grind at something that you don't like, because like, eventually the person that's going to win is the person who enjoys what they're doing every single 100%. Day, because then it's so much easier to show up every day and work hard at it.
Right.
So like, it is. Yeah, I mean, that's like the recipe for being a top 1%er in whatever work you're doing, is like, you actually have to give a shit about the work that you're doing, which is like maybe obvious, but also not spoken about enough. But look at the leaders within whatever organization you're in, and I could almost guarantee that they actually care about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so if you see yourself as someone who wants to be a leader within the organization but doesn't actually care about what you're doing, you're probably not in the right place.
Yeah. Now, that said, I also do want to caveat that by saying I was there for 2.5 years. You were at Visa for 5 years. I don't think you should make these decisions in the first 6 months of a job. Like, I think it takes time to sort of realize it. Like, moving right from college to a job is a big adjustment in and of itself. And I remember when I started swimming, which I did before we rode, like, I hated swimming for the first maybe year, and I didn't want to go to practice, and I didn't like it. And it took time for me to adjust. And ultimately, I loved it. Like, I still look back on it and it's like one of the best experiences of my entire life. But it took time to get into it. So I don't think, I want to make sure that's clear as well, that you shouldn't rush to these decisions. It's a process of collecting data points. That is what you really want to be doing, or at least what I did. So I think we should talk then about, and again, for the people listening, like, this is really, I think, just to be an introduction to us and kind of our stories, because I know there are a lot of people we talk to out there who feel some of these things. So the purpose of today is really to sort of tell our story, and so people have an understanding of where we're coming from, why we talk about this stuff, why we're in the space that we're in. And then, further episodes will be more relevant to the specific field that we operate in. But so I think maybe, the next step here is talking about our leaving and actually the breaking points of, when we decided to make the jumps.
Yeah. I think maybe you should start, just given that you were the
fair.
first to do that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm 2.5 years into Barclays. Really, I'm probably 2 years into Barclays. And actually probably less. I'm probably like, not even actually, it was less. I joined Barclays in August of 2019, and then March of 2020, obviously COVID hits. And so I was in this like weird sort of sphere, or like this weird spot where I still had my job, but I was working from home. We were back at our childhood home. And during that time, I had a lot of downtime. And again, I was still getting acquainted with everything. So none of these thoughts of leaving were in my head at all. Like, I was just kind of learning and making sure I did well and impressing the people around me, building good relationships. So I wasn't thinking of leaving. During this COVID period, you and I started a small business called Verbar, which is essentially a virtual bar that people could log into. It was like a Zoom room where you'd invite your friends. It was not Omegle. I know people out there might be thinking this. It was not. It was much more sophisticated than that, but the premise was comparable, where you join a Zoom room with a group of your friends, and then we'll show you the other groups that are online. And if there's a joint match, we'll put you into a timed conversation. We'll have would you rathers, games like that. It's quite fun. Anyways, point is, we somehow, by the skin of our teeth, landed Williams College as a customer. And I remember getting a $3K check in the mail from them. And that was a bigger moment for me than getting the $105,000 check down the line. I know those from a timeline standpoint. Well, the big check was later, but as I look at them in comparison, that $3K check had a bigger impact on me, because it was like, whoa, you can just go out and build things, right? And you can create things. And this is the first time I sort of had that notion of, hey, maybe there's a different path out there for me aside from finance and consulting. And so I started to dig in, and I got really obsessed, and I started listening to the My First Million podcast. I would talk to all the people I could find in my network who were entrepreneurs. I would go to events in New York once the city eventually opened back up. And I just kind of followed this thread, because I got a certain energy from it every time I thought about it or listened. Like, I would listen to these podcasts and listen to these stories, and it would just light me up. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. I mean, I'd be sitting at my desk. I'd have one AirPod in my left ear because my boss sat to my right, and I'd just be listening to this stuff. And, eventually I decided, hey, I think I want to move. Like, I am feeling like I know this is not where I want to be long-term. And I have a sense that this is generally the direction I want to go in. That's probably all the information I'm going to have. You're always going to have 70% of the information. Like, let's just make the decision and make the move. And so I ended up quitting Barclays the day I got my bonus. I texted my boss at 5:15 in the morning. I woke up, I saw $60,000 had hit my account, a lot of taxes and everything. We're in New York City. And texted my boss. I said, hey, can we meet? And he knew what it was about. I had told him, like, hey, we're going to be, it's probably not for me. I'm thinking about other things. And I put in my 2 weeks there. And, that was that. So like I quit my job to become an SDR at a Series A startup. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Andrew. If you're enjoying the podcast and some of the messaging is resonating, you work in finance consulting, or you're just thinking about what might be next in your career, please reach out to us. We have a link in the description. We'd love to chat. We're always looking to chat with new candidates and people who are high caliber, looking to make a jump to startups. I really didn't even know what SDR stood for, I don't think, at that time. I just, I knew generally what the role entailed. I liked the people, and I was like, screw it, let's go do this thing. And so made the jump, and I'm so glad that I did. Like I remember that I think the big takeaway for me in our Verbar experience, and like this is probably something I glossed over here, but like why I wanted to be an SDR was I realized I didn't have any hard skills. Like I realized pretty quickly in that entrepreneurial experience that I didn't have hard skills. I had a good resume, but I didn't actually know how to do anything. If you told me put me on the street and told me make $1,000, I would have no idea where to start. And I decided that I wanted to build that skill set. Because I knew no matter what, sales would be valuable. And when you go to a startup, the only two things that really matter are building or selling. And so I was like, you know what, let's get into sales. And so that was kind of the point that I got to. That's why I left, and what I was thinking. I don't know, I can go deeper on pieces, but I also would love to hear your story.
Yeah. I mean, that's super helpful. What did people think when you left Barclays? Like, what did people think of the decision?
Dude, I think everyone was like, okay. Everyone was super nice, right? Nobody was mean to me. Like it was a great team. But I think people were like, what are you doing? And I know mom and dad too. I think we're like, hello, like you're, my base salary at this job was less than the bonus I had just received. So it was definitely, and I was like 3 years into my career. So it was definitely a big risk. And I think people realized that. And honestly, most of them probably didn't say it to my face. I think they were pretty supportive, in front of me, but probably on the sides, they were saying things. I think it was like, what? You're becoming an SDR? Like, do you even know what that is? Yeah.
By the way, I don't believe that you didn't know what SDR meant when you left to be an SDR.
I honestly feel like for some reason I remember not knowing what it stood for. Maybe when I was applying.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think my story, like, it ties into a lot of what I was saying before, right? Like feeling this kind of lower level of motivation, kind of lack of fulfillment, the desire to actually care about the work that I was doing and to see the contributions that I was making to the organization that I was a part of. And so for me, like all of these things kind of compounded, and I was lucky in that you had started to build a business and I had some exposure to the business that you were building while I was at Visa and could see, the joy that you found in building a business and obviously remember the Verbar project very fondly. I think like in thinking about this, I think I've always had an entrepreneurial muscle. Like I can remember building a recycling bin for the local coffee shop in Sudbury, Massachusetts at our hometown. And every week I would go and collect the recyclables from that coffee shop and return them for 5 cents for a, can or a bottle. And like, that was my business. I ran that with a friend of mine. And we would split the proceeds. We'd probably make $20 every week off of the like cans and bottles that were returned from this one coffee shop. But that was when I was 8 years old, like literally realizing that my actions could lead to some like societal contribution and to dollars. And that was like a really cool realization. And, and from there it was like lemonade stands, or it was being like a bouncer in college for the frats because we were all rowers and we were tall. And like, there was constant like sort of creative ways to make money throughout my entire life. I've had these projects. And so I feel like I've always had the entrepreneurial muscle. And this then I, kind of in a corporate setting for 5 years, gradually feeling a decrease in motivation and like level of fulfillment, and then seeing you not just building, but also like building in this area of early stage businesses, which is like, not only are you yourself building and like contributing to something, but you're also in the ecosystem of a whole group of people who are super passionate about what they're doing. So it wasn't just that we had the opportunity to build, it was that like we had the opportunity to build amongst builders. Like we got to put ourselves within this ecosystem. And so it was, obviously a risk, again, like it kind of a different risk profile than your initial move, right? Because I wasn't actually joining like any business. There was no Series A to TopSDRs. It was, hey, I like have done a couple of placements, and I think there's like something we can contribute in this space. And we have great networks. Like, we're lucky to have a really strong foundation for the business in our like Ivy League rowing networks. It's a really like great initial pool of talent to draw from, and gives us kind of like differentiated value in the market. I believed that. I saw that there was kind of a path to making real money in this space. Felt like it was something I wanted to do, wanted to take the risk on, and was like a complete, entirely different than my current role, and satisfied a lot of the things that I was not feeling in my current seat as well. And made the jump in June of 2025 when it was clear that I could at least cover my rent on this business, which was basically the minimum bar for making the transition. So, that's the story. And it's, to be honest, I haven't really looked back since. Like, we have had an insane amount of fun building this business. We've had a lot of success. We've, in a very short time, become pretty plugged in to this niche of top performing early stage businesses in New York City, specifically with a focus on sales talent. And like, man, I really think we're just getting started too. Like, there's a lot more that we can do in this space. So, I that's my like quick breakdown. It's a crazy, like literally going from a $500 billion market cap, 30,000 person company to employee number one, I guess, or whatever, like to a 2-man shop. So, that's my story.
I love it.
All right. I think we should talk about like maybe first of all, why sales isn't a path that many people are taking out of like elite academic institutions. And then why people might consider moving into sales after a year or two in like the more traditional paths out of school.
Yeah. I'll speak from my own experience because that's all I know. But when I was at Harvard, sales wasn't even on my radar. And I think if you had mentioned sales to me, I would have been like, I would have thought of like when I was at Harvard, sales was not on my radar. And honestly, it was not not something I had any intention of pursuing. I think I saw it as slightly below me because it wasn't as academic. Like, I was a Harvard student, I am in classrooms with the sons and daughters of world leaders. Like, I can't go and be a salesperson cold calling people begging for money. Like, surely that's not what I need to be, I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be, in my ivory tower at an investment bank or a consulting firm. And like, that was like, honestly, probably my mentality. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I think you get the point. I feel like a lot of people in these top institutions probably see sales in the same way. What I've realized since graduating and having worked in sales and having worked in finances, first off, everything is sales, right? If you're interviewing, you're selling yourself. If you are an MD at a top bank, you're probably really good at sales, right? Okay, if you're a quant at Jane Street, sure, maybe sales isn't as big a part of what you're doing. But by and large, a lot of the top performers and most senior people across great businesses are salespeople. And so that's the first thing I realized. Second, and this is, again, only, when I think I realized this as I became an SDR, which was that so much of the confidence I had in myself was borrowed confidence. I had an ego that was built on institutions I had been a part of, but not things I had personally accomplished, right? I had, gone to a good school and worked at a name brand firm, but I hadn't really done anything, right? Like, I had, I'd taken classes and done well and worked hard in rowing and all of that, and that was great, but I had not really produced value for anybody. And I think that's ultimately what the world comes down to, is like, if you want to do well in business, it's how much value are you creating for other people? And I had never been tested. And so I realized so much of my confidence was borrowed confidence that I didn't really have any hard skills. And being in sales was the first real test of that, where, when you cold call somebody and they tell you to fuck off, the veneer disappears pretty quickly, and there is no, that's not black, there's no gray area there. That is just black and white, right? And I think people avoid sales because they realize that, and they don't, maybe subconsciously they realize like it's scary because you're going to be tested and people are going to tell you no. And, if you've done well and gone to good schools and great firms, you haven't really faced rejection very much. And rejection sucks, but I also think, count the number of times someone has faced rejection in their lives, and you could probably make a pretty good guess about how successful they are. Honestly, I really think that. I think people who have faced more rejection are probably more successful because they've just tried more. Like I was listening to some podcast about the OpenClaw guy the other day who built OpenClaw, and he's talking about, he made like 75 projects before he made OpenClaw, and he's like 4 of them were successful, right? It's like, this dude just tried the most though. Like he was out there just hustling, just building things. And so to get back to the core point, I think people look down on sales but I think it's really their ego not wanting to be tested. And I think sales is invaluable because it underpins everything that you see in business. And the best way to get good at it is just to do it. And when you build that thick skin up, when you build that thick skin and you can just face rejection and not care and move on to the next, then you're invincible. I mean, that applies to business, dating, whatever it is, right? Like it's a superpower. So that's why I think sales is so valuable. That's my tangent on sales.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the initial part of the question is like, why aren't people going into sales straight out of school? Which I think, like, honestly, it almost entirely comes down to just a lack of like visibility for most students out of elite institutions. Like, I really do think it's just, you're just not getting that much exposure to sales as a serious career path. And like, you're not really given the resources to understand what it looks like. You just see like the highest performing people on any elite college campus know that consulting and finance are the ways to continue that like caliber of education and, like caliber of talent proximity and compensation. And like, you basically don't consider anything outside of that. But I think if you actually put like the category of sales that we're talking about next to those things, people would more seriously consider this path. But I think you're right. Like
say more. What do you say more about that?
Well, I think like if you objectively assess, let's say these 3 paths, right? Finance, consulting, and sales at a high performing early stage business. Like, if you look at the pros and cons in the day-to-day life and the growth trajectory and the compensation and the talent proximity and like the learning and the skills, everything, I genuinely think more people would land on sales at an elite startup as a priority outcome. But it's just not visible enough on college campuses for people to seriously consider it.
That's probably true.
You're fighting the stigma of what you explained, which is like sales is perceived as kind of a secondary option, or maybe like there is definitely like the sleazy salesman association, or there's the kind of going to like large sort of slimy corporations in these like giant SDR orgs getting paid horrible money and like true. Not having a serious true. Like promotion trajectory. And that's like an entirely different bucket of roles than what we're talking about, which is selling on behalf of the best early stage businesses in the world and having equity in these businesses and contributing to the growth of these businesses. And like that versus, I don't want to name names, but like being one of 200 SDRs at a kind of like mediocre growth rate giant corporation. Those are very different things. And so yeah, I think like that's what you're battling. Lack of visibility combined with some stigma against sales makes it a like secondary option, if an option at all, as compared to finance and consulting. I wish it was more present on college campuses, but I also think people come to the realization a year, 2 years into the career that, oh, wait a second, this isn't everything that it was promised to be. I should look at some other possibilities. And then you recognize the level of opportunity there is here in this path. But it takes time, and it like takes a little bit of education to show people the level of opportunity here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Can we talk more about like the level of opportunity there, to your point, meaning like maybe some compensation and like what you make? Because I think that's also something that there are some misconceptions about probably.
There are definitely misconceptions about compensation in elite early stage startups. First of all, like we basically don't place anyone at below 120,000 total comp. And sales comp is structured as on target earnings. It's base compensation and then variable compensation. So roughly $80,000 base, roughly $40,000 variable. If you're hitting your numbers, you'll make that $120,000. And if you're exceeding your numbers, you can make over $120,000. And that's kind of the like ballpark for SDR. Where the compensation starts to get kind of insane is if you look at equity and if you look at the AE comp. Like AE comp, which account executive is the promotion from SDR BDR, takes about a year on average to get to the AE level once you've kind of proven yourself in the SDR seat. And we have plenty of AEs making north of $500,000 a year and some making north of $1 million a year across these companies. And like that is so unfathomable to a lot of the population of people that we were talking about earlier, which is, the people who go the finance or consulting routes. And it takes a decade to start to see numbers like that. The reality is, if you're going to one of the highest performing early stage businesses, you can very realistically expect to make north of $500,000 a year at the AE level in a pretty like short period of time. So even at the like, as you get in the door, you're not sacrificing that much compared to early career roles in consulting firms or like banks. And then as you climb the ladder, you're certainly competitive and in most cases exceeding what you would make in these other seats. So, and that actually doesn't even take into consideration equity, which grows obviously with the business. And if you get into the right company, all of these businesses want 100x. So if your equity is going to 100x, like you have a very material piece of the compensation that is, not even really discussed in the kind of like general comp package. So, yeah, I don't know. Anything I missed on compensation there?
No, honestly, I think that I'm just looking at our bullet points here, and I think you knocked it out of the park.
I think the like other thing to talk about these environments is the talent concentration. That's another thing that I think is often underappreciated and understated. The caliber of talent at the highest performing early stage businesses is absolutely insane. Really, really, really good people make up the best early stage businesses. It is honestly really hard to get in the door in most of these places. So like it's not going to be easy. And I think like, sometimes there's a disconnect there too, right? Because if you have perceived sales as sort of a secondary path, you might think that, if I was able to qualify for this finance seat, it's going to be easy for me to land this SDR role at a startup. That is not true. Like basically if it's exceptionally easy for you to land the role, it's probably not a great company. Like it should be hard for you to land the role. And you should look at the makeups of these teams and you'll recognize that like the caliber of talent, the talent density in most of these environments is off the charts because again, the opportunity is insane and the ability to contribute is crazy and the level of fulfillment's awesome and the energy you get from your work is amazing. And so like the best people start to realize these things and then concentrate on the best businesses. And obviously those are the ones that you want to get in the door at. So I think like that's such it's often underestimated, like how high quality the like talent density is in most of these places.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. All right, I feel like we should start to wrap it up here. And I don't know, are there any like last things that you want to, again, this is kind of just introductory, our story, our kind of core beliefs as a business. Like, I don't know, anything in particular that you want to leave people with as we kind of phase out here or end this first episode?
I think like one of the one of the key messages that like from our story and in what we do is you should constantly be assessing the job market, and you should be constantly like objectively considering if there's something out there that might be a better fit for you. It's really like that simple. And there's no reason not to do that. It costs nothing to do that. And like you might have things that like there is almost certainly a role out there that will be a better fit, that will make you happier and will have a better like overall package than where you're currently at. So why wouldn't you constantly be assessing the market holistically and see where those things are? And I'm not like, sales is not for everyone. Like you need to be and working in early stage environments is not for everyone. So I'm not necessarily saying it's this, but I do think like fundamentally everyone should be constantly assessing, am I in the best place possible, or are there other things that I should be actively pursuing? And like, yeah, it's just very easy to get siloed and complacent in your seat because you have like figured out how to operate in that role and it's the world that you have spent most of your career in. But there are almost certainly better things out there if you like were to objectively consider the full market.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And it's something people don't, I didn't realize it early on. Like I kind of was nervous about quitting and loyalty and all that. And you realize pretty quickly that, yeah, you got to do what's right for you. And people are understanding and they want the best for you. So you got to be selfish a little bit and explore and until you find that thing. But all right, I mean, for now, I appreciate everyone who's listened. And, you know, if any of this resonated, you're coming from consulting or finance, you're currently a student at a top school thinking about what's next, like reach out to us. We'd love to talk. I think, future installments here, we'll actually interview people and have folks on who've gone through this path. For today, we just wanted to sort of give a preview of who we are and, introduce ourselves as we have honestly built up a bit of a following on Instagram and other channels. So appreciate everyone's time and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Perfect. Thanks all.